Welcome everyone to the regular council meeting for Tuesday, April the 11th, 2023. I'd like to remind everyone that meeting participants are advised that the meeting is to be recorded for public access broadcast. With that, I would like to call the meeting to order. And with that, I have a motion to adopt the agenda. So moved by Councillor Thorne, seconded by Councillor Colwell. All in favor?
Aye.
Contrary-minded? Motion carried. I'll remind anyone if they have conflict of interest, there's forms in the middle of the table. To please take a form and declare so now. No conflicts. With that, we'll have an adoption of the minutes. We'll have two adoptions or two motions, one for the regular council meeting of March the 13th, 2023. Also moved by Councillor Lena, seconded
Oh,
by
sorry.
Councillor.
No. I wasn't here.
So moved by
Oh, you weren't there.
Councillor.
I was.
I shouldn't second minutes for
all in
the-
favor?
that.
Contrary-minded? Motion carried. Second motion for the committee of the whole meeting on March the 27th,
Was it that one?
2023. We'll have Councillor Bland, seconded by Councillor Colwell. All in favor?
Aye.
Contrary-minded? Motion carried. With that, are there any questions to any of the consent agenda items? With that, public administration.
Have to adopt, motion to adopt.
I,
A
I'll make a
motion by
motion,
Councillor
yeah.
Kane,
Second.
seconded by Councillor Blenis. All in favor?
Aye.
Contrary-minded? Motion carried. With that, item 6, public and administrative presentations.
None this evening.
Number 7, reports and recommendations from committees and private meetings. Item number 1, recommendations from closed session, February the 13th, 2023, and March 13th, 2023.
I'll pass this one to Diane, but just as a reminder as to why they're in this section of the agenda, we'll do these reminders for the first little bit, but no decisions can be made in a closed meeting, so they have to come out to be formally ratified. So that's essentially what the motions are for. Their direction has been predetermined in closed sessions that are coming for ratification. The other element that we are working on doing in an attempt to be open in terms of what is being discussed and because we have to meet certain criteria to have conversations in closed is to introduce a backgrounder that will be read by the clerk. So basically what we'll do is Diane will read the backgrounder, then there's the recommendation, which is the motion for consideration on the table. So with that, over to Diane.
okay, so the first one is human resource audit. So background on this one is in August 2022, the former Village of Salisbury authorized the completion of a compensation audit as part of human resource audit. In light of the budget transfers completed during the regular council meeting on March the 13th, 2023, and in light of the results of the human resource and compensation audit discussed during the closed session of March 13th, 2023, Council has accepted the results of the audit and directed the CAO to implement the recommendations accordingly. So do you want me to repeat the recommendation or just?
I think someone can move.
Move that council authorize the CAO to implement the results of the human resource audit from Smart HR Solutions.
Second.
So moved by Councillor Colwell, seconded by Councillor Thorne. Questions to the motion? All in favor?
Right.
Contrary-minded? Motion carried.
Okay, so the second one, employee manual background. With the arrival of the CAO for the town, and the CAO council policy that clarifies the internal human resource structure, in addition to findings and recommendations, a number of modifications were proposed to council as discussed during the closed session, March 13th, 2023.
I'll move that council approve the updated employee manual for the town of Salisbury and direct the CAO to review the manual regularly.
Seconded.
So moved by Councillor Blenis, seconded by Councillor Dykstra. All in favor?
Aye.
Contrary-minded? Oh, sorry, I said other questions to the motion, I apologize. All in favor? Contrary-minded? Motion carried.
Okay, next one, lease agreement. So this lease agreement was with the Salisbury Pharmacy Limited. Background is that the town of Salisbury has an existing rental agreement with the Salisbury Pharmacy to provide space for a nurse practitioner's office provided through the Horizon Health Network. This MOU is a mutual agreement between Horizon Health and the town to outline the mutual responsibilities to offer this service to the community. The review of the agreement was discussed during the closed session of council on February the 13th, 2023.
I'll move that council authorizes the clerk and mayor to sign an MOU between Horizon Health and Regional Health Authority B, the ADA Horizon Health Network, the town of Salisbury, and the Salisbury Pharmacy Limited, and affix the corporate seal accordingly.
By Councillor Dykstra,
Seconded.
seconded by Councillor Thorne. Questions to the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Contrary minded? Motion carried.
I'm gonna step out for the next one. I didn't notice it. Or
Yeah.
think about it, and I'll just fill that out
Yeah.
after.
Okay, so Councillor Caldwell has removed herself from the meeting. The next one is Baseball Association Reciprocal Agreement. So the background is whereas the Salisbury Petty-Kodiak Minor Baseball Association has a successful baseball association to the benefit of many youth in the area, and in light of their use of the Salisbury baseball fields, the town has proposed an updated reciprocal agreement that stipulates the mutual obligations for the field rental, usage, maintenance, etc.
I'll move that council authorize the clerk and mayor to sign the reciprocal agreement and affix the corporate seal accordingly, and direct the CAO to propose an updated cost formula for the annual rental usage fee for the association at a future meeting of council. So
Seconded.
Moved by Councillor Thorne, seconded by Councillor Dykstra. Questions to the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Contrary minded? Motion carried.
I'm just gonna note that Councillor Caller returned to the meeting.
So I'll move that council authorize.
So next one is lease agreement.
Just give the background.
Background,
All right.
town of Salisbury as the owner of building
I appreciate that.
64 Douglas Street, where the Salisbury Helping Hands Food Bank is located. Leases the building free of charge for the purpose of offering their services to the community. Where the current lease agreement has expired, an updated agreement has been proposed and approved by council during the closed session of February 13th, 2023, and approved by the board of the Salisbury Helping Hands Food Bank.
I'll move.
Go ahead. I lost my spot.
That council authorize the clerk and mayor to lease agreement between the town of Salisbury and Salisbury Helping Hands Food Bank and affix the corporate seal accordingly.
So moved by Deputy Mayor Bannister, seconded by Councillor Olinas. All, questions to the motion? All in favor? Contrary minded? Motion carried.
So next one, ratification of health and safety policy. So background on this one is a part of the HR audit completed in 2022. It was recommended to the town to remove contents of the employee manual related to the health and safety in order to adopt the requirements as a standalone policy. As discussed in relation to the updated employee manual during the closed session of March 13th, 2023, given it was formally a component of the employee manual, personal matter, it is recommended that council adopt the policy as a standalone document.
I move that council adopt the health and safety policy for the town of Salisbury as presented.
Second.
Moved by Councillor Dykstra, seconded by Councillor Gallant. Questions to the motion? No questions to the motion, all in favor?
Aye.
Contrary minded? Motion carried.
And last but not least, ratification of the social media policy. Background on this one, as a part of the HR audit completed in 2022, it was recommended to the town to remove contents of the employee manual related to the health and safety in order to adopt the requirements as a standalone policy. As discussed in relation to the updated employee manual during the closed session of March 13th, 2023, given it was formerly a component of the employee manual or personal matter, it is recommended that council adopt the social media policy as a standalone document, where there are now additions involving the fire department, and the fire chief has also confirmed that the policy is in alignment with the directives that are given to the department.
I move the council adopt a social media policy for the town of Salisbury as presented.
I second it.
Moved by Councillor Tory, seconded by Deputy Mayor Bannister. Questions to the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Contrary minded? Motion carried. With that, we will move on to recommendations of the committee of the whole meetings, February 27th, 2023, and March 27th, 2023.
So this one, we only have one item from February 27th. Diane will read the background. But just because it was discussed, and it was in the council package, a little bit more detail. But it is, our recommendation to proceed with the electoral upgrades, especially because these details were lacking in our initial CRF, but this is also the electoral for the washroom buildings as well. So essentially there's no power in that area unless this is restored. So that's why the recommendation is what it is. And there was also a request to get more information from the association as it relates to their use and need of lights. And so, based on their usage, there's some more information in there, but basically it's booked Monday to Friday. And the lights start being required in July and they go to, all the way through to the fall. So, there's a substantial use of both the lights in the fields, and given that and the need for the electrical at other buildings, the recommendation is to proceed. You want to read the background? There's a more formal.
I'm gonna leave again. It's too nice. Sorry.
I don't think we need to.
Well, I'm not.
Let the record show that Councillor Caldwell has left the meeting at this time. And baseball field electrical wires. So the background on January 16th, 2023, electrical wiring from the Salisbury ball field, number 1, so the number 1 field. Lighting was damaged from an attempted theft. The RCMP investigation court proceedings are ongoing. As part of the investigation, an estimate was secured for the repair of the cost at $8,475 plus HST. It was presented to council at the committee of the whole on February 27th, 2023. Council requested that the information be sought relating to the usage at nighttime of the fields. It is the intent of the association to have the fields booked Monday to Friday for practices. The lights are mostly needed in July and August and September. Given the usage of the fields and the fact that the wiring also serves as the electrical source for the main baseball field building, administration is seeking authorization to proceed with the work as estimated. Where the work is an estimate only, the costs may be higher than the estimated base on the degree of damage. Administration is seeking council approval to proceed with the work based on the estimate only.
I'll move that council authorize administration to proceed with required repairs to electrical wiring at Salisbury's baseball field number 1 with Roadway Systems Limited at an estimated cost of $8,475 plus HST, and advise council if any cost overruns are incurred once work is completed.
Second
Moved
it.
by Councillor Lena, seconded by Councillor Thorne.
Yeah, if there's any, based on the court proceedings from that, would we be reimbursed for that cost or
There
potentially?
may be options, depends on convictions. So we asked for an update, we haven't gotten any yet. But we're keeping our ear to the ground in hopes of
Mhm.
hearing something. So, yeah,
Good.
we'll come back to council if there are options to explore.
Good.
But as long as if there's a conviction, then they know who did it for sure, then there may be options presented to
Okay.
us. But no further updates now, at least.
Additional questions?
Just a quick question, but it might be an aside, may not be pertinent to this big of thing, but were the lights ever upgraded to LED? Or are they still the original lights that were there
I want to say they're
25 years
original.
ago?
Yeah, I want to say they're original.
They looked at how much it would cost and it was well over what we could afford, so they just repaired what they could and kept the old ones.
Yeah, we can ask for a study around that. It
And
was-
the wiring will be
it-
needed
It was
regardless.
significant, yeah.
That's my
lighting was
point, if
significant.
we're already there working.
Yeah, just a bit of a background, we can get the clerk's office to do a background study. It was a bit of a study done probably 4 or 5 years ago, Diane. But one of the challenges was the unknown whether or not the elementary school at the time, which was supposed to be replaced. The school district had talked about potentially putting the
In that
school there,
location.
potentially there, so it was really, the previous, I guess, counselor that was in charge of Parks and Recreation at the time, or Recreation and Wellness. There was a bit of apprehension around proceeding and putting a lot of money in infrastructure, and then not knowing it would be all throwaway.
So
There's-
this also apply to not necessarily the wiring, but any of the other upgrades that were considered.
Yes, there are some conversations with the association too around a potential grant that would cover things like lights. So they indicated interest last year just before the deadline. And it's just like a substantial grant, and therefore it's a substantial application. So there was no way that we could pull it together in a couple of days, but we expressed a willingness at that time to say, okay, next year, let's look at it. So they've already indicated an interest to, because it has to be submitted by the municipality. So it would more than likely include something like lights. So we can look at costing, especially when we have them there, to look at what that would look like, because I wasn't here, I had no idea off the top of my head what it would cost. I do know that it's a specific line in the borrowing board.
Yeah,
Oh,
I
there's a
can
term
give
for it.
I can give the number, but again, it was a number that was.
Oh, it's
provided,
out of date.
It was several $100,000.
We can come back. We can look at
It
it.
sounds extravagant.
I know, I'm only going by what was provided by the previous council.
I don't know what the need for lights for a ball field are, so I can't comment on that. Having said that, that brings up another question. If the school does end up going there at some point in time in the future, do we have a place for ball fields in the future?
The school has to
The school
provide
has to
replacement
provide,
when they're there.
the school would need to provide land and move and do it. Which again is part of other future discussions.
Okay. I'm good.
With that, all in favor?
Aye.
That's very minded. Motion carried. And we'll wait for Councillor Crowell to come on.
Record show that Councillor Fowler returned to the meeting.
With that, move on to item 8, reports from administration. Number 1, appointment of volunteer award committee.
So this is further to an appointment, or council appointments, I should say, that were done, at the March council meeting, I believe, right, March? And so these are the 2 individuals that will sit on the volunteer award committee, which will be meeting this week or next to select the recipients tomorrow. There you go. To select the recipients for the first annual, volunteer awards event. So with that, there's a recommendation in the CRF. I don't know if I'm missing any key elements from that.
I'll move that Shelley Gladstone, Christy Landry, Jarrett Crossman, Lori Patterson, and Diane Ailes be appointed in addition to Councillor Nathan Oblinus and Councillor John Muba Dykstra for a 2-year term to the Salisbury Volunteer Awards Committee.
Moved by Councillor Thorne, seconded by Councillor Glenn. All in favor? Or sorry, any questions for the motion?
If there are other people who had volunteered to be on this committee and obviously haven't been chosen, do we go back and let them know?
There were only 2, I believe, for this one. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And it will be for other ones, we do have more than the positions will, so we'll continue to accept them, and then, well, this is the first time we might have to, we'll figure out the process. now.
Okay.
But for this one, there were only 2. And that's how many we need for the event next week.
When will we have details on the event?
In what sense?
I'm BMC.
You'll get details this week, probably. Yeah,
We have a meeting tomorrow night.
Should I come?
that's to select the winners. We can take that one.
We'll,
later, yeah.
we'll let you know afterwards.
Yeah. You'll get an MC script, basically.
Okay.
MC notes.
I'm not real script worthy though.
Bullet points,
There you go.
high level.
I might hear.
All in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Very minded? Motion carried. With that, the next is number 2, award of the RFQ, Sols 2023-06 half-ton truck.
So this is a budgeted expense, although I will remind council that the facilitator did indicate that this was for a fire truck in the budget, which is not the case. Despite reminders, I wish that we could buy a fire truck for this price, however, we cannot. And so 4 dealerships were invited to bid on a 4x4 crew cab. There's 85,000 budgeted in that budget line. From the recipients that are in the package, 1 firm did not submit, a second submitted after the deadline and is therefore not able to be considered. And with that administration, the recommendation on the table is to proceed with the lowest bidder, which is McDonald Buick GMC, at a cost of $55,177 plus HST.
I'll move that council award RFQ Sols 2023-05 4x4 crew cab pickup truck purchase to McDonald Buick GMC in the amount of $55,177 plus HST.
Second it.
Moved by Councillor Dykstra, seconded by Mayor Bannister. Questions to the motion?
Is there any significant difference between the 2 vehicles that were quoted?
No, they all met spec. Both of them met spec, and so Trevor, can you hear us? Were there any difference other than the specifications? Like, that's the main thing, that they were given a list of the must-haves, so they both met those. Trevor, were there any?
They were given a list of specifications and both met, and there was no real difference between the two.
That's championship.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Any additional questions to the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Reminded? Motion carried.
Congratulations, Trevor.
Item number
Thank
3, number 8, award of RFQ Sols 2023-07 asphalt patching.
So this is another budgeted expense. So just for some context, this is for the former village boundary where we're responsible for the roads, unlike the outside areas. So what this is essentially a firm on retainer to complete our annual patching program. We estimate that we'll require 125 tons for this year's patching work based on estimates from previous years. In addition to requesting pricing for that work, we also requested pricing for the type of materials that we need for additional asphalt cuts. So whether it's sewer repairs, so on and so forth, so that we don't have to get a quote every single time. So with that, administration is recommending proceeding with the lowest bidders, which are different from the annual asphalt patching program versus the firm that would be retained for the purposes of ad hoc needs. So based on the estimated tonnage and the recommended bidder, it will cost approximately $60,737 for this year's patching program, excluding HST, and there's $75,000 being earmarked in the paving and patching line in the 2023 operating budget. So with that, there's a recommendation on the floor, and for any questions.
I'll move that council award RFQ Sols 2023-07 for the annual asphalt patching program to MacArthur's Paving and Construction for Type E asphalt patching and retain Brown's Paving for remaining asphalt services in 2023 as necessary.
Moved by Councilor Thorne, seconded by Councilor Detour. Questions to the motion?
I have a question.
Councilor Lance.
Should the motion stipulate a cost that we're approving, or
No, because it's based on an estimated tonnage, so it goes by price. So I included the cost just so that council knew that it's not, this cost does not put us over budget, like we should be based on our estimated tonnage. And based on previous years, our public works staff will go and indicate where they need to be patched. And then they're given updates because it's not all done in one day, so we won't suddenly get a bill that's 5 times as high or higher than we expected, so.
I might have missed this, but why MacArthur's versus Brown's for the whole thing?
Because of the price difference. Yeah, there's not a significant price difference, but it is lower.
Having said that,
No, but I mean, sorry, so it says the program we're using MacArthur's, right? Oh, for
For
Yeah.
type B, and then the
Right,
rest is
and the
gonna be
rest,
for,
perfect, okay.
yeah.
Excellent.
so having said that, does it not make more sense since it's a $2 a ton difference between Browns and MacArthur's to use Browns as sole source and to either use that power to negotiate a better price for doing all of it, or B, preferential treatment, i.e. they show up when we call very quickly. There seems to me that you get them to do everything, there'd be more value there.
There could be, however, council can make that decision. However, we have to recommend the lowest bidder because that's what the
Yeah.
procurement act.
The other
tells us
option
to do.
is if you've got 2 people doing work for you, or at least you've got a little bit to compare to and possibly some competition, and you might make different decisions in the future, as opposed to putting all your eggs in one basket. So I hear what you're saying, but I think there's a different options as well to look at it now.
Yeah, but I know normally when you buy more, you get less price.
But they're required to meet that price because they bid on, like, so for
They're
instance,
locked in, and they're also locked in, I guess, to world markets right now, and I'm not sure how it's fluctuating with asphalt pricing right now. Last year it went up by 30-some%.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's gonna
It's
continue.
all
or it's gonna-
oil, WTI based.
I'll leave that on the table. We can approve or amend the motion as council wishes.
Additional questions?
so I do have a question. It's a procedure question, I guess, more so. We can we don't necessarily have to choose the lowest price, but you have to recommend? Or do we have to, does the procurement act
You have to have a
indicate?
reason why
Yeah.
you're not.
Yeah.
Who have we used in the past?
Both.
Yeah.
Who are we happy with is the better question.
Trevor?
I don't know if I would speak to that in a public meeting either,
Yeah.
because it's contractual in nature, but, it would, the threshold for awarding to one versus another, there's certain requirements, like if it, say one of these was an out-of-province company and another one was an in-province company, you can use that as a justification.
Can you?
But yeah, yeah, there's a New Brunswick first stipulation in the Procurement Act, yeah.
That sounds like that's challengeable, but
So
carry
there's,
on.
yes, yes. So there's those types of stipulations, but for this one, I don't know, Trevor, if you want to type in, I think MacArthur's was the one that did our patching last year, I believe.
MacArthur's did our patching last couple years, and we've used Browns in the past. Both are good companies. Done excellent work for us. That's pretty much all I can say.
I mean, I see what you're saying. Administratively, this looks like a nightmare to me, but I'm fine with your recommendation. Like, you have to deal with that.
You want
So,
to
'cause
juggle
I-
the ball. Just seems like you get more out of it dealing with one of them.
What's the approximate cost savings in the $2 difference
Not a lot.
versus the administrative work to manage two different invoices and contracts and people?
The two different work processes?
It's two different types of work. Trevor, correct me if I'm wrong, but the type E is patching. So they're coming in and they're doing patching over however many weeks. The other one for the second piece is if when we have a scheduled asphalt cut for a sewer repair, whatever that is, we're calling them to come and fix it. So they're essentially two different types of work, same materials essentially. But the
Majority of the money will be spent on patching. The rest of the work is as needed, which is generally a lot less.
So if they're pretty unison in nature, no matter who the actual contractor is, like if they're on their own track. I guess for me, just to your point, is if for $2, if it's gonna save us $3,000 and cost us $5 to administer
It's
two
not-
different contracts,
not
and
even
pay for
that.
invoices or
It's like $200.
whatever it is.
But this is the process.
Yeah, I
Here we are.
understand that there are processes in government. That's nice.
I'm still good with the motion as is.
I hope we have this much thought going into something more than $200.
yes,
So when we fly by an $8,000 or $70,000 expenditure and spend this much time on $200.
my recommendation is to proceed with the lowest, just because that's generally,
Yeah.
It's not a bad idea to
Yeah.
have two vendors either.
Yeah.
No, it's not actually, it actually can work well in the long run. Okay,
And we don't have to administer.
Exactly.
questions, additional questions on the motion? All in favor? Reminded?
Nay.
No?
Did you say nay? Or I gotta say a little louder? So Council
Nay.
Dykstra opposed.
Motion carried. Item number 4. The approval of a CCBF application, design services, Salisbury Fire Rescue Station.
So this one is related to the next agenda item as well, which would be agenda item number 5, but is being put forward on the agenda ahead of time intentionally. So just for a bit of context, the CCBF is the Canada Community Building Fund, formerly known as the gas tax, which is allocated based on tax base formerly to municipalities. And so we've used it for projects like Horseman Street, Highland Park Washroom, as 2 examples. And so traditionally, funds for the LSD tax base, where these funds come from the feds to the province, were used by the province for different projects, not necessarily in the LSD areas that got that allocation. And so with municipal reform, obviously a lot of these areas are now municipalized. And so with that, the LSD allotment in the new municipal boundaries of Salisbury would be for this year only, $188,312. the former municipality has to approve a 5-year plan to identify their CCBF projects. But where we are not an entity that merged with other existing entities, we are able to tap into this funding on an application project by project basis versus an updated 5-year plan. At the same time, it is, like I mentioned, 1 year only. Not only because of local governance reform, but also because this is the last year of the current agreement. So the feds in the province are currently in negotiations now. Hopefully we'll know soon-ish as to what that will look like long-term. But they're in negotiations for, I would assume, another 5-year agreement, or whatever that may look like, but this would be for this year only. And so in true good timing fashion, we got this memo advising us of this change or additional allocation at the very start of the evaluation process for the professional services for the design of the station, which is, like I mentioned, agenda item number 5. And so with that, we're recommending that these outside area funds be allocated towards this project, which would enable us to continue with this work this year. The only thing that I will note is similar to conversations that have happened around the Highland Park Washroom. If funds are spent on design work for a project, the project must be completed or the funds must be repaid to the CCBF account. And so if for whatever reason council decides to proceed with the design services of the station, but not proceed with construction of the station, at a certain point, the province will require us to repay those funds back into the account. And then, of course, council can choose to allocate these funds elsewhere for a different project or series of projects. But it really was for the sake of the stars were aligning, I would say, from our perspective. And that's the essence of this particular agenda item before diving into details of the next one. The last thing I'll mention, I promise, on this is that the province has indicated initial approval or in favor of the application. They generally will look at it before we come to council to avoid having an approval of an application, then them having changes and us having to wait a month to come back. So it has been vetted on a preliminary basis by RDC, who administers the CCBF funding in New Brunswick. So with that, motion and questions on the table.
So, question?
Motion, sure.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I'll move that council adopt the Canada Community Building Fund, CCBF, project application from the unincorporated area allocation for Salisbury, titled Salisbury Fire Rescue Station, Phase 1, and direct the clerk treasurer to submit the request to the province of New Brunswick to use the funds accordingly.
Moved by Councilor Bannister, seconded by Councilor Thorne. Questions to the motion, Councilor Detour.
So just for clarity, I think I understand this, but just in case anybody actually is watching our meeting in the future. So we're talking $188,312 that we have potential to get or will get.
We will get if they approve the application for the project. So if we went in for an ineligible project, they would say no, submit the application again. But normally, so what the former village has, and we still have, is a 5-year plan. So the council approves a 5-year plan. So you can save the CCBF funding for 3 years and then do something large.
Right.
They approve it on that, but unless you're merging existing entities, they're allowing us access to these funds. So in our case, the 188 and some on the application basis, which is what used to be available to LSDs if they were to submit projects. So they're just basically replicating that process for our allocation.
So the second part of the question, which you answered, I believe, was that this 188,000 is as a result of the outside village LSDs.
We get, don't have the number in front of me, 172 or something this year, like.
177, hopefully.
Okay, so it differs depending on.
No, this is great, because then it just can be applied to the fire station. That's great.
And then in future years, hypothetically, we'll get, let's say it's the exact same numbers and the agreement is the exact same, I'm sure there'll be changes, but it would be 188 plus 172. And then I suspect they'll want council to approve a 5-year plan if their agreement is for 5 years. So that will be end of this year. They've actually said that the negotiations are at a very, very early level, and we may not even hear until like next March, which is when the program starts. So it's a little bit delayed, I would say, to where they want to be, but that's what it will look like.
It's better enough.
Sure.
That's for
Yeah.
sure.
I have a quick question. Is there a timeline for these projects? Like if the building is delayed because of materials, like does it have to be done within 3 years or?
No, so I asked the same question because I said, does it have to be done by December 31st,
Right.
2023?
Right.
And the answer was they've already finished their reporting period for this current 5 years
Okay.
because they're in negotiation. So he said it will be at least 5 years because
Nice.
it won't be until they do the next one. And ultimately, the reason it needs to be completed is because the feds, this funding program goes to all of the provinces, so they need some sort of consistent metric. So the one that would make this project eligible is number of new buildings. So if we do the design services and use this money, we're not reaching that metric of number of new buildings. So that's why they need that, but we would have lots of time to do that. And their construction delays because of commodity pricing, so on and so forth, is normal, especially now.
Right.
That's what happened with Highland Park, Washington.
Okay.
So having said that, this particular fund that we're utilizing that is achievable because of the LSDs, is there any stipulation that this project have to be done in an LSD?
Because it's done by the new entity is submitting it. So this funding that is coming from the outside area LSDs would not have necessarily been done in the LSDs beforehand. The province used to pick and choose where the funding went. So they could take, hypothetically, they could take the funding from all of the LSDs in the whole province and do one infrastructure project in wherever.
So that wouldn't have happened in the past, but carry on.
That's what they use it for
Well,
in
no,
the past.
in the past
Yeah,
with the
that's what they do.
LFDs, John, we all paid a certain amount,
Yes.
but we didn't get that amount in our LSD. They could choose to do whatever they wanted in whatever line. And a lot of the bigger LSDs, like Coverdale, for instance, was a big LSD. We actually subsidized smaller LSDs. So a lot of the money that we did, never went into the Coverdale LSDs.
The one good example, I don't know if it was someone here, if it was the person at the province or who it was that a few years ago, there was a substantial infrastructure investment in by the province in the potash mine in Sussex.
Mhm.
That was CCBF funding. So it was given through a CCBF allocation. So that was a lot more than Piccadilly's allotment of CCBF. Because of the size of it. So it used to go into a pot in the province and they used to allocate based on if they got applications from the LSDs or what have you. But the only ones that used to get a specific tax base amount were the former municipalities.
So would that have been for the Piccadilly water system?
I'm not sure what exactly what it was for, but it could have been. It could have been.
It's kind of like roads. All the 41 cents we're paying, it all goes into a pile.
Yeah.
And they just decide where it's gonna be. We could have some or none.
So having said that, should we be applying for this every year?
This is a new thing because it used to just go into this pot. So now I suspect because a lot, including us, we're asking, what about our outside area LSD allocations for CCBF? So I don't know what made the province make that decision, but this is the last year of the current agreement. So that's what I meant. In future years, I suspect it will be 172 or whatever we mentioned it was, plus 188. And then at that point, council will have to do another 5-year plan for the full entity with that total amount. That's a suspicion based on what the program looks like now. It could fundamentally change. They could not do the program again. I have no idea. I hope that's not the case, but.
Great question.
Great question,
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Additional questions? No additional questions. All in favor of the motion? Contrary minded? Motion carried. With that, item number 6 in section 8. Or five, sorry, award of RFP Sols 2023-01, professional services fire station.
So this one, if you look at the numbers, based on our tenders, was the first one that the first procurement that we actually issued as a new town, I guess, as well at the start of the year. So a bit of background, in early February, an RFP was issued on NBON, New Brunswick Opportunities Network, for professional services for the design of the Salisbury Fire and Rescue Station. It's for a number of professional services, which we broke up into 3 phases for the purposes of the RFP. So a bit of context as to why we decided to take this approach. So as a smaller municipality, we have no in-house engineering and also limited staff with expertise into actually building fire stations, as well as the resources to tender each of these phases on top of the rest of the day-to-day. And so because of that, the series of professional services goes from day one to handing over the keys of the actual building. There were some questions throughout the procurement process, mainly from firms that were architectural in nature, related to the methods that we were using to actually request their pricing. So a lot of time architects bid based on construction value. So we're not that far in the process yet. So we don't have a construction value. This firm will help us do that. And so we did request bidding basically on a fee schedule. So completion of certain deliverables. In the Procurement Act, it does stipulate that any goods or services, which include standing offer agreements that exceed a dollar value of $121,200, must be issued on MBON as a method of competitive procurement. So we really did not have any option to procure otherwise. And specifically, it's section 163(1) of the Act, within regulation 2014-93 of the Act, that states that we cannot design procurement processes in a way that split up costs or phases to avoid going on MBON. So this, like I mentioned, goes from day one all the way to handing over the keys. And so the three phases, just to kind of I guess, dive a little bit deeper into what those day one to handing keys over. The first one is the design phase. So that's all of the architectural plans, pre-construction drawings, liaising with the town, and the development of a working group where we'll involve members of the fire department. The cost estimates, class A and D, that's the presentation to council, the community consultation or inputs, the preparation of any subsequent tenders that may be subcontracted, so site preparation, so on and so forth, that would happen before we actually put a shovel in the ground for the building. Technical advice throughout the project, which can include technical advice on the energy source that we will use based on funding applications, so on and so forth. So that's the high level Coles notes for phase one. The second piece is tendering. So that's completing the construction tender based on the pre-tender and pre-construction drawings that are completed in the design phase, administering the tender, issuing addendums, and then making a subsequent recommendation to council. Just based on this RFP alone, the number of addendums and hours that are spent issuing them, anytime that someone asks a question, they have to be issued via an addendum to MBON so that any firm that opened the package has the same response. So it is very, very time consuming, especially with something as complicated as actually constructing a facility. And the third is during the construction phase itself. So they would, in essence, serve as our owner representatives. That's attending all of the site meetings, completing all of our engineering inspections, making sure that the facility is being constructed to the specifications that were included in the tender. And so the town received 6 proposals, and were each evaluated out of 100 points. 3 firms were clear leaders that were mostly on the basis of the amount of points allocated on the basis of price. And so we have a recommendation before council this evening. So I do, again, just to stress in case it's not clear, this is not the construction of the actual building. This is the series of professional services to get us there. So we will not have brick and mortar building when we award this contract, if that is the will of council. And so similar to the other ones, I'll mention what we have budgeted, which is not the amount for the recommended award. So in the 2023 operational budget, there's 80,000 budgeted. So in the last agenda item for the CCBF application, there's an additional 188,312. That would take us to the end of phase 2, which would be the end of the tendering process, with a small shortfall, my apologies, of around 9,000. So there are a number of options that we would be able to explore once we get there. The RFP does allow us to, if we get to the costing phase, we can pause, so that we may not even get to the end of the tendering phase by then. But there are options which can include not actually issuing the tender until January 1st, so it's in the next fiscal year, so on and so forth. But there are some options to get us there. So with those 2 combinations, it would allow us to continue working on on this project this year. And then last but not least, I would be remiss if I didn't thank Diane, Trevor, and Brad for their time evaluating the proposals, because there were a lot of them. Each of them were about 60 pages long. So they are quite detailed to go through. So I would be remiss if I didn't mention that as well before diving into the recommendations and then questions on the floor, which I suspect there will be some.
Are we allowed to ask a question before the recommendation?
We can't do no, we have to.
We need a motion.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll move that council award RFP SALS 2023-01 to Jost and Jost Plus Architects for a total value of $311,854 plus HST for the purposes of undertaking professional services for the Salisbury Fire Rescue Station during 3 phases: pre-construction, tendering / contract award, and construction phase, as outlined in the RFP issued on NBON.
So moved by Councilor Oblinas, second by Councilor Thorne. Questions to the motion? Councilor,
So this does and doesn't have relation to this, but I think it's, I wanted to write it down and ask just in case, so I don't forget. Are there any opportunities to extend the boundaries to the town areas covered by the fire department, considering how much money that we spend on the other fire departments that support certain areas, whether it be Riverview or Moncton or other fire departments? Once we are at a particular point in time, it could be we have to wait until the fire station is totally built and we have, more modern facilities and maybe more firemen. But it seems to me that I recall I think it was over $200,000 that we pay to other municipalities for those outside areas. And that seems to me an opportunity for us to take a look at and see how can we take full advantage of our new fire station and resources to maybe cut part, if not all of that, out. So I just thought I'd throw that out there.
It does. I don't have a direct answer for you other than I suspect that it will come up. So as something that's on the docket for this year, we don't know exactly what it will look like, but the province has indicated that they're going to look at fire services. So my understanding, obviously not an expert on it, is that it actually goes by distance from the station. It's an insurance question as well. So there's kind of a magic distance, which I think is 13 kilometers.
13 kilometers.
From the station. And so there are some key areas where, especially with the Moncton Fire Department, where we can actually respond quicker. So I'm not sure if the distance is different or if it's just based on the route that one station has to take versus another. So we suspect we'll have those conversations this year. So I would say, yeah, it's still it technically is related to the station because it does go by distance of the station. Obviously the land from here to there won't make that much of a difference,
Right.
but it will, we suspect, come up as part of the province's review of fire services, whatever that may look like within the context of municipal reform. But the other conversations around some pieces, just around some of those quick win areas that are mutually beneficial, whether it be for Moncton or for us or both, would probably happen this year as well. The chief and I have had some preliminary conversations on that.
Okay. I'm glad to hear that, because I think, if I think of the distance from, let's say here to even my place.
Yeah.
It's less than 13 kilometers.
Yeah, yeah. I think we might have mentioned that when the chief was here, but around that part of the ward, it's Bunker Hill is like, I think it's right in between.
It's right, yeah.
The demarcation.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, it will be part of the conversations, partially as part of the station, but broader for sure.
Well, yeah,
in the
it's
coming
just an
months.
opportunity to save us some money perhaps.
Yeah.
Without, of course, degrading the services that are available
Right.
to the residents.
Right.
Are we, sorry,
That's okay.
able to tap into any of our other city gas tax fund to meet that deficit?
We, the 9,000 deficit, you mean, or
No,
just the
to finish out
the
the work
rest?
that we're awarding, like, can we, if we wanted to do it all in 2023, can we use some of the other stuff that's from our 5-year plan? Can we reallocate funds from that to this application?
We can, as long as there's funding remaining. So with some projects that are on the docket with the existing CCBF, there may be some to reallocate. It would require a readoption of the 5-year plan. So our recommendation, just based on the fact that it's probably, I don't want to say unrealistic, but unrealistic to do anything further than awarding a tender, just based on the timeline. would probably not be possible for this year, but as similar to what I was mentioning about, we could wait or pause, or depending on where we're at in the project. I would say for the same thing for that. As we go along, we'll get a pretty good indication of this is moving faster than we thought, or this is moving way slower. We may not even need to use all this CCBF funding for this project. Like, we'll know that as we go, but it would definitely be an option. It's eligible for former villages CCBF allocation, as well as the outside areas. So it's gonna be a wait and see. The rest that isn't covered this year, we'll be able to include in the 2024 budget, because it'll be in next year. And ultimately, technically, the construction services, which is phase 3, could be part of the borrowed amount, but ultimately, the less we can borrow for, the better. So chances are, our recommendation where we have that amount already budgeted this year would just be to carry it over, and it'll be okay. But that will be to be determined based on where we're at later this fall.
My question was on the top 3 proponents. Was there a consideration done to a firm being local?
Yes, there were a few. So one of the biggest, I would say, comparison amongst the 3 was experienced specifically with fire stations. And I was mentioning to Councilor Vittori, the lead architect on this firm will actually be a resident of Salisbury as of May. So she will be very local, but we did discuss that as well. The firm is technically based out of Nova Scotia, I think.
Valley.
Yeah, Annapolis Valley, yeah. So there is that, but they have a Moncton branch. They're expanding, but the main, I would say, comparison when we dove into 2, because of the proximity and points, was experience with fire stations specifically. I don't know the number exactly, but I think this one was 9, I think, so including some like right now. So we looked at that a lot too, just because of the nature of construction value right now. So it was a consideration, but not at the top, I would say. That makes sense.
Additional questions?
Oh, I have a couple, but I'll wait till everybody else is done.
Oh, you go for it.
Excellent. In terms of design phase, who's actually looking at the stipulations for the design? Is something they're bringing to us, different designs? Are we specifically asking for a certain type of design? Is it a steel structure? Is it a brick structure? Like, what is the process for that?
The process will depend on a few things. The first step, I think that will answer most of this question, is that if this contract is awarded tonight, if not tonight, then tomorrow morning, the firms will all be notified of the result. Then the next step for us will be to establish a working group, which will include members of the fire department, internal, and then their team as well, that will be assigned to the project. That will start by looking at the existing needs assessment that was done in 2019, to have a conversation with the fire department around, or the working group specifically, will be kind of our liaison between the 2. What are the needs? What does that look like? At the same time, the firm that will be actually designing it will be basically our representative to determine what are the options in terms of most feasible, especially given the different costs that we're seeing across the board as it relates to construction. So that's all part of that initial design phase. They'll present to council a Class D estimate. So there's basically a large contingency amount saying this is what we're recommending. It will also depend on potential funding avenues that council may direct us to look at, that will dictate part of that as well. And then it will ultimately come down to, I suspect, conversation around cost, but council will be given some options before going any further to get actually into Class A estimates, which are once we're ready to go to tender. But those will happen, I would say, this summer-ish, once we establish the working group, start to determine needs in terms of number of bays, office space, so on and so forth. Then the firm will come back to us and say, okay, well, based on this, you should look at X material and X heating system, so on and so forth. But they'll look at all those and cost them as they go.
So having said that, are they operating as a general contractor, or are they operating as a representative to the general contractor?
They're operating as when we get to that point, as the owner's representative. So they will administer the tender to hire the general contractor. So they'll make the recommendation to council. So as opposed, it will still come as a CRF and whatever else, but the recommendation, the evaluation will involve the working group. It will be prepared by them as part of these services. And then during construction, they'll probably have people there too, but they'll have the engineers on site that need to be there, the architects on site, depending on where they're at, to attend the bi-weekly site meetings, whatever that will look like, that will be stipulated in the tender that they would prepare an issue for us. But they'll be the ones that make sure that the construction of the building is being done to the specifications that are approved during the process.
Okay. One other question I had, in awarding this, is this a contract with Joe's Plus Architects specifically for those services?
For these 3 phases, yes, everything but the construction, so those services.
So having said that, with it being a contract, is there any stipulation in terms of performance metrics for their end of things?
We have an opt-out clause, which can include just cost. So if the costs are too high, we can say we're not moving forward. They've also I think most of the firms did actually, noted places in the timeline where they actually suspect there will be a delay. So whether that be a pause of 2 weeks for approval, or a pause of 2 months, or a pause of 2 years, is all dependent on things of cost, council approval, council meetings, so on and so forth. But we have an out for pauses or performance or budget. So we could, let's say the last agenda item wasn't an option. We could say that we're going for what we have budgeted this year, and then we're done on that basis, but that was all included in the RFP.
I just think there should be some performance based in terms of not dragging this out
Yeah.
forever. If they want to lose money because they're dragging their feet,
Yeah.
that's their problem.
Yeah.
Just keep things moving.
Yeah, there is an out clause, and we'll sign basically something as well, that takes the RFP and puts it into an agreement that has that.
Just
as well.
performance.
Does the performance have, as part of the out clause, penalties against them?
It should.
So sure, that's, I think, but I believe that's what probably you're alluding to.
Yeah.
That from a performance perspective, it's gonna be a bit of two-way.
Yeah,
That would have had to have been in the RFP though, right?
yeah.
Good enough. If he's got it there, then that's all.
I don't think there are penalties, but I know there are no penalties stipulated in there, but we can, because it would be, I would say, the most prudent to do it just to formalize it, beyond a conversation, to formalize that. So we can do that in an agreement with them, if we're authorized to undertake the services, basically.
Just that overage, time overage, cost
Yeah.
overages,
Yeah.
there are penalties associated with
I
that.
mean, it makes sense on both sides, to be honest with you. They wanna meet their timelines.
Yeah.
We want something done.
Yeah.
Yep.
If we're gonna pay $311,000,
We,
because that's looking at, I'm assuming, close to 10% of the cost of this project.
probably, I don't know, I have
I'm
no
just-
idea.
In the old world, yes.
Yeah,
I don't know what today's
It's-
market rates are for a fire station, I can't say
That's-
for sure, but
that's
it's a
actually.
significant cost relative to what.
Yes, that is actually what we were told anecdotally through the process, was, the percentage that normally architecture firms would propose. So they would just say 10%, if we use that as a number, 10% of construction value. So if your building is $1 million or $1 billion, it doesn't matter if they put the
They
same
want
amount of time
10%.
in it, it's 10%. So, just based on some of the proposals that came in, I would say that they're probably estimating a construction value, and that it would probably be around that. So I would say that's probably accurate. Yeah, and so we can explore that, the penalty piece.
I'm all for it, just please make sure it is expandable in the future.
That was in
That doesn't make sense.
in the background piece, that, the land is, on our side, I think, for this one.
Yes, but it should be made to be doubled in the future if we so desire.
Is there, in the amount that has been proposed, is there any contingency that would go above that, or is this is the cost for all of these phases? End of discussion, that's all they're gonna charge?
This is the cost of the deliverable, so they have to provide a number of deliverables, so it's Class A estimates, for example, but before that, they also have to do Class D estimates. They've budgeted an amount of time, and we did look at during the evaluation, we looked at some, okay, well, in terms of that was part of the cost allocation as well, so XYZ firm spent this many hours working with the working group versus ABC firm has 1 hour, and there's not much input there, so it's all based on deliverables. They all just may have had a different approach. So regardless of the firm, they have to meet basically the check boxes of each phase. It's just the approach that differs, not the final product.
Additional questions? With no additional questions, all in favor of the motion? Contrary minded? Motion carried. With that, item number 6 in section number 8, grant requests.
I'll pass this one to Diane too, but just as a quick reminder, refresher, so council approved a grant policy on March 13th. A number of requests have been submitted to the clerk's office before. I don't think any came in after from this list, but we held them until the process was approved, knowing it was imminent, just to make sure that we could consider them all at the same time, essentially. So Diane has a number of recommendations this evening. It would allocate $11,500 of the total $35,000 that is budgeted for grants in the 2023 operational budget. So I guess, Diane, we discussed it quickly, but they can ask questions on specific requests or applications, or choose to accept the recommendations as presented. It's up to council. So I don't know, we'll pass it over, I guess, to see what the appetite is around the table in terms of process, but either works from our end, I believe.
Kind of basically said everything.
I'm confused by what you just said.
So we can do,
You can do one motion.
One by one?
request, or we can
Okay.
accept
Or
as
one as a
presented.
whole.
Depends on if there's questions on the applications, recommendation, or dollars, basically.
I mean, I have some questions about a couple of them, but I don't know that it would. I think.
then
if
Let's
we-
go through them. Let's just go through
Okay.
them. It won't take long. It's not like there's a million, so let's just go
Okay.
through them.
So, do you want me to repeat?
So we'll do them individually?
Yeah.
Okay.
So. You got everything else there.
I think
No, you can
you
just go one.
Just
I would just go
Time
first
for
request.
Silver,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So following requests were received while working on the policy. So the Silver Fox Art Circle requested $500 for their annual grant. This funding has been given to the group in the past out of the recreation and wellness budget. So it was part of the rec and wellness budget, not necessarily the grants budget. So staff is recommending to award $500 again this year. And then we'll send them a letter, when we send a letter of decision, that we'll suggest they might want to do a multi-year commitment. Yeah, so they should apply for the multi-year grant.
So I guess the recommendation is the motion, right?
Yeah.
So we should motion.
Motion. and
Yeah,
second.
and then question.
So I'll move to motion that the award of $500. Let me start over again.
Yeah.
It's worded a little bit differently, isn't it?
You can just say award.
Okay, so award, I move to award the $500 and recommend to the group in their letter of decision that if they want a multi-year commitment, that they should apply for the multi-year grant.
I second that.
Moved by Deputy Mayor Bannister, seconded by Councillor Plant. Questions to the motion, Councillor?
I have a question. So I know it says that it was $500 for their annual grant. What is the grant for?
So they use their grant for the program itself. They are lucky enough to get the Lions Club, I believe, for free and use the Lions Club for their area. But they have special people coming in to put on presentations. They've done water, they do a lot of water painting and so watercolor. So they have some kits put together. So if you wanted to go try, they will have a kit put together that you can try it without putting your own money into it. Then if you like it, then you can go out and buy your own stuff. So some of the money goes towards like brushes and supplies that they might need for something like that. I think they probably give a donation to the Lions Club out of it. But they've had special guests come in, so it would be paid for those special guests to come in and teach them more different things like that. And there's been years where they don't spend it all. There's been years where COVID, they didn't spend any whatsoever. Yeah, so.
I would have a recommendation that maybe we get a bit of a background on who they are, what they're about.
Well, I guess
I was gonna
that's
say,
my
yeah.
question. Who runs
I
this?
think it would be, I
It's for
personally love to,
residents.
I would love to invite them to
Is it-
come
It's
in.
for anybody, there's people from Moncton, Riverview that have
Right.
come over the years.
So I had the opportunities to have them come in and.
They used to go
I think it'd
upstairs.
be good to have them come in and meet with council.
But
to
is
do-
this Donna that does?
No. This is, as it.
So this is not like her soap making classes. This is
No.
a
No.
different
It's
group all
independent
together.
from our-
Independent,
yeah.
So
I guess I'm getting, nope, I'm gonna stop.
they used to get funding through the Recreation and Wellness Department or,
Mhm,
but it's run separately.
mhm.
I've never heard of it.
So they did it upstairs for a while, but then they had a hard time going upstairs. Some of the elderly ladies didn't want to go up the stairs.
Mhm.
So then they did it next door in the actual breakfast, like building for a while, but it's not enough room. So then they looked for another spot and went
Yeah.
into So there's 2 or 3 main people. I don't like saying names that much with the
Yeah.
whatever, but there are a few people that have been with it since the start and created it.
I would say we just
It's-
get the organizer to come.
Yeah.
We can ask you,
Yeah.
to come.
I think my confusion is just how things were done in the past, budget wise, so I'm gonna not.
This used to
This
be
was separate, this
included,
was not part of grants before.
yeah, it was
Well, that's what I
included,
mean, like, how did some things get put in the budget and how did some things get, but I'm gonna raise that question later, so that's
we're trying to
okay.
pull this
Yeah, yeah,
to the
yeah,
grant process.
got
That's
it,
what it is.
To
right?
speak-
because that's what it is, and I like what you're
Yeah.
doing.
So the Rec and Wellness Department put this
Yeah.
on as part of their Rec and Wellness Department.
And now we're
Much
saying
like-
it's not part of the Rec and Wellness Department.
hasn't been
it's
in
a
the budget.
It
separate
hasn't been
group,
in the budget this year.
Or,
Because
Few
it's a,
years.
because it's a separate group,
and because of COVID, they weren't.
Well, they,
operating.
they stopped during COVID.
got it,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Got it. Cool.
So do you want someone to come and put on a presentation or
Yes.
would you like?
Great.
Before or after approval, what's your,
Oh, it can
Do
be
you-
after for me, I don't. Yeah.
okay, so the motion still
The
stands.
motion
then,
still
yeah.
stands without additional questions to the motion. No additional questions, all in favor?
Alright.
Very minded, motion carried.
So we will reach out to see if they can attend a meeting. The next one was from Royal Canadian Legion Branch 31. They're requesting 6,000 to continue with the Veterans Banner Program, and purchase more banner brackets. Little background that last year, $4,000 was donated to the Legion for this project. The town incurred costs for installation and removal of the banners and the new brackets. And the Legion administered the selling, and ordering of these banners. We have a recommendation, but I'll skip to the next one, basically explain it a little bit better. The town contributed, if the town contributes this project, if we take a certain amount out of, I don't know if you want me to explain all that, but if we take 45,000 out of the grants budget and 25, let's try 4,500. 4,500 coming out
Thank you.
of the grants, 2,500 coming out of beautification. Then, and then we are suggesting that no checks actually go to the Legion for this because we've paid it out of the town. And then we can also order additional 20 brackets, manage installation and removal of banners, store the banners again for this year. And then the Legion is just responsible for administering the cost of the additional banners. So that is why we are recommending that the town continue to purchase, install, remove banners, and have the Legion be responsible for selling, ordering, and providing these banners.
I'll move to have the town continue to purchase, install, and remove banners, and to have the Legion be responsible for selling, ordering, and providing banners.
And I'll second it.
Councilor Dexter, seconded by Mayor Bannister. Questions to the motion?
I have a question.
Question, Councilor Glenn?
Last year, we contributed $4,000 to this,
Out of the grant, yeah.
out of the grants
Mhm.
for 40 banners, correct?
Correct.
Correct?
Was that installation too, or is that just the banners?
Well, that was just the brackets, I understand, right?
Those brackets and help them get the program going.
So, so I'm struggling to understand how $7,000 is needed for 20 brackets this year.
So we incurred additional costs related to installation and removal that I
We
don't
hired
think was
We hired
accounted
a boom,
for.
yeah, we hired a boom truck
Yeah.
and did all of the.
Yeah, because it's not, it wouldn't even be safe, I would say, with the ladder to get these brackets up straight and for the first time, like the brackets are there at least for those ones. So we estimated, which is another reason that we want to provide essentially almost a support in kind, like we're not cutting a check. Because it could be a little bit less, let's say, to remove them, although there will be 20 more, so there's a time difference there, but we basically contracted that last year. So last year was the first year they did the program at full scale, so there were some additional costs incurred, which, and also because we keep the brackets and the brackets to store them, but the brackets themselves, so it just makes sense for us to purchase them for this project, because we keep them, we store the banners, we'll arrange, install, take down, and then the Legion, like they were last year, is still responsible for actually selling the banners to veterans' families or groups that are purchasing, so on and so forth, but I would say it's just based on a more accurate understanding of what the program actually entails. Yeah. Last year it was a bit of a pilot, let's say.
I have
Yeah.
a follow-up question to Jason's question and your
Yes,
answer.
Paul.
So with, so we're funding purchasing the banners, but then they're selling? them?
So they sell them, I don't remember what the exact price is, but they sell them, so if I have a veteran in my family and I want a banner, I arrange through the Legion to send them the photo and do this, then the Legion brings us the banners and we install, take down, purchase the brackets.
So it's basically
Those are
just a
the-
reallocation of funds to let us buy the brackets and
Yeah.
manage the maintenance, installation and takedown?
Yeah.
So we're just shifting the budget,
As opposed to giving them a check
got it?
and then us
Mhm.
administering
Mhm.
the installation, removal, so on and so forth. And we suspect it will be an ongoing thing, so this year they're buying 20 more brackets. I think they had a surprise as to the amount of interest they had
Yeah,
last
they
year,
had some
so they've
upset
got
people that
20
couldn't get into the
more
program.
yeah, they got 20 more brackets this year
So
and may have more
next
next year.
If we know we're going to be doing like the up and down, just like we do the lights, Christmas lights and the things, like, can we put it, instead of taking it out of the grant budget, we'll put it in our operational budget?
We can include it in beautification. I would say especially where we have, if we had 42 and then we're buying 20 more, that will probably, this is a hypothetical, but probably increase the beautification budget to have banners outside of November too, because the banners sit there, so it looks nice when their high school ones are up. We're ordering some this year for June for participation. So there's some options there to start adding to the roster, which is another reason we want to buy the brackets. There's no
Mhm.
sense, like,
Yeah.
So,
They're
so the
Yeah.
brackets are up year round or they come down?
I think they're up.
The brackets
still up
are
on
out.
Brackets remain, right?
Just the new ones, yeah.
The banners come down so that they
Yeah.
don't get wearing.
I think it's great. It looks it looks
It does
awesome.
look
It looks
Feedback
fantastic.
feedback was.
It really does.
Yeah.
Can't wait to see them in Riverglade.
There you go, but we might get there. We might get there if we keep going that way.
And I don't question it because I disapprove of the program. I'm concerned about the cost because yeah, just last year, the cost that we agreed to was $4,000.
We cut them a check for
It'd be-
4,000.
okay.
Yeah,
And
that's
then
the
had
diff-
costs on
So
top.
now you're in
Yeah.
control of it.
Exactly.
Yeah,
That's,
yeah.
and
I like that.
it's-
I like
yeah.
that.
At the end of the day, this was something that was talked about for ever. It happened, rave reviews. We had lessons learned from it. Now with our clerk's office, with the lessons learned in the public works,
Mhm.
they'll be able to administer it and have the whole program going forward.
Nice.
Again, to your point on, I think this is the one thing is we've brought our community together. The thing I liked about this, well before municipal reform ever happened,
Mhm.
we had individuals from Riverglade, from different areas that said, well, my uncle, my grandfather, my uncle
Mhm.
isn't from the town. I wish we could put them up. And we're like, but you can.
Mhm.
This is for, do you shop here? Did your kids go to school here? This is for all residents. So this is the one thing from unification as a new community that we've been doing well before reform. And, kudos to.
And so that does trigger another question for me. What is the vetting process for who gets to put a banner up?
We
What's
don't-
the
Administered by the Legion.
Ministered by them?
Yeah.
There's no criteria that it's Salisbury residents that can request and purchase them?
No, the Legion is open to all veterans because we have veterans families that have moved here.
I think they just made sure that they were.
Yeah, I'm not, yeah.
That's about it.
Yeah,
I
I
think
know
we-
there's that,
Legion
but-
administered all of that.
but if this town is spending money to maintain the program, or do we have residents who are not able to get a banner up because somebody from out of town has put a banner up?
No, because they're open to anybody that puts the request forward that's willing
Right.
to.
More the
Can
merrier.
we request that, well, more the merrier, if we're paying for the cost of putting them up?
Yes.
We can't, it's just not a blank slate. I
It's
wanna
only
know
for
that
the
if
polls.
we're spending town money to administer this program, that our residents have a bit of a preference of getting their banners up.
Where last year, because they had a number of requests, like, I think it exceeded expectations, I think, in
Mhm,
terms
it
of
did.
number of requests, so we can because they'll get a letter or an email or whatever that will look like for informing them of the
Mhm.
decision on their request. So similar to the last one, we're gonna recommend a multi-year application moving forward to avoid having to do this every year. If they're gonna come back every year, we can request that they consider that in light of the number of requests that they had last year and the likelihood of exceeding their 20 quickly. Ultimately, if they want to buy more banner, like brackets, like we'll have this cap, so there's some room there potentially. But we can request that they do
Yeah.
that, but it's designed in a way that they arrange the banners. We just arrange the install and the.
Yeah, I suspect they are at 7 or 8, but
Well,
they came in
yeah.
after the covering and stuff.
Regardless of who arranges it though, it's the town that's putting them up, so people are gonna think that it's the town that's administering.
Yeah.
It would just be
Right,
nice, I guess, information to know, how are they choosing? What's
Yeah.
the process, like,
Yeah.
just if we're going to give the grant for this, what's the administrative?
Are our
side?
residents benefiting from,
Just from
other than the,
general interest.
the
Well,
appeal?
I mean, we can get Susan to come in, but right now, if you are a resident in this area that wants to honor a veteran and pay for that, we are a community, according to the Legion, that honors all veterans that want to be honored here in our community.
Except the
That's
ones
how
that
we-
we declined last year though, right?
But they weren't declined.
That was
Even after the deadline.
FaceTime,
They-
yeah.
It was just
yeah.
timing, like they actually indicated anybody after the timeline to bring them forward for the following year. So they'd accept all veterans.
My question, Jason, is, to you is, if your grandfather lived in Ontario, but you live here and you
Yeah.
want to
Honor them.
honor him, do you think that he shouldn't be because he
No, no,
doesn't
no.
live here?
No, what I'm
Just-
saying,
just like-
yeah,
Just want
no,
clarification.
it's, if you're a resident of the town of Salisbury,
Right,
you should be able to request a banner to be put on,
For anybody.
for anyone.
for anyone.
So okay, but I think that's probably.
That's how they're.
So I
That's
wanna
how-
understand
yeah.
what they're,
Yeah.
well, I don't know if it is or not, right?
Yeah.
So, like, we don't have a say in which banners go up and which ones don't.
Right,
I would like to understand what their process is for vetting those. Is it resident requests? Or is it veterans from Salisbury? Like I said, I don't disagree with the program. I think it's a great
It's
program.
not like.
We want
right
we
now,
want to
it's not
support it.
veterans from Salisbury, it is.
yeah.
I put it, if you're
Yeah,
from.
I know that-
if you're now, or have if you want to
It's
have
kind
a.
of similar to Stephanie's point on the craft circle, art
Yeah.
circle, right? We just don't
Yeah.
know. We don't
Yeah.
know. We're saying yes to grants, which is
Yeah.
great. But it's nice to have just some more information, just to understand it better, make the residents understand it better too, right?
Well, I think even just logistically, it makes sense to find out if we currently have the availability of 40, we're going to expand it to 60. Is that the maximum we can achieve? Or when there are more than 60, are we gonna be able to expand?
Hmm.
Do we have enough poles to expand to?
Still the other side of the street, we haven't looked at.
No,
We're gonna
but
put it under the
that's where
streetlights.
there's some
Covered
criteria as to what is the maximum. Oh, yeah.
We gotta get some streetlights down there.
That's a bad idea. I think if somebody lives in Riverglade, why don't we put the banner in Riverglade?
In the
Yeah.
future, I agree.
I think it's nice to have them in a, like, cause it's
Yeah.
like people,
It has the impact.
If you use
Why
some, if
don't-
you use some, pick some main intersections
Area.
around the.
I actually agree with that. Like, I think
Yeah.
that, you could have corners or intersections or whatever. That if you had
Different.
4 people from Riverglade or.
Yeah.
Or your
Cover that.
participation banners or your Christmas
Any of
banners
it,
or
because we
the
have-
cases in the future.
It'd be good to
Exactly.
put the brackets.
I think it helps to link
Yes,
Yeah.
the outside
It does.
portion
Yeah.
of
Absolutely.
Salisbury to the town.
Yeah.
So it makes,
Yeah.
okay, we're now, we can start to
Yeah.
see that there are things
Yeah.
that you don't have to go into the village to see.
exactly.
Even if it's something
That's
like a banner,
right.
right?
The village expanding it into the town.
Exactly.
so I think, so what, there's kind of a couple elements to this. We can look at, for that one specifically, I would say, have discussions with the Legion. The nice thing is that we're nice and early for Memorial Day this year.
Yes.
So we have lots of
And
time.
they may have more requests
Um,
coming in during closer.
Later too. Yeah, they probably won't start, I would suspect,
Starting right
until
around
later,
now.
but,
Starting right around now.
November's
they-
over yet.
yeah, we can certainly ask them to come.
Yeah. Oh, really?
We can certainly ask them to come and present to council, that's one, and then the second piece is that we can, as we're having those conversations around beautification, so on and so forth,
Mm.
can look at getting some in specific areas, similar to what we're doing with streetlights, for example, looking at some of those areas, so.
But I think to Jason's point, I think the main point for me is if I had a resident asking me,
Mhm.
okay, what's the criteria? We
Yeah.
need to know what the answers are, right?
Yeah.
If nothing else, we need to be able to say, if you're a resident, any resident can ask for this, as opposed to it has to be, a member of the.
So do we want them to
Armed forces.
come in and present the criteria, or do we want, and the program in general, or do we want to just ask them that?
Just ask them.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I would also, on top of that, ask them if they want, because to me, you're talking about declining their request, which I'm not really a fan of in general. But
No, what-
We're not- we're not gonna-
declining the request for $6,000, we were declining, instead telling them we would like to administer ourselves.
Mhm.
It might be worthwhile having a conversation to see what they would like to do before you tell them how we were going to do it. I'm not saying one way or the other, I'm saying
Cause I
have a
think
discussion with them about it.
the request came in for that amount for brackets, which brackets aren't that much, so
I-
we're
don't-
looking at continuing the process as last year, because otherwise, if we give a $6,000 check, we'll still be responsible for
I
it.
understand, I'm just saying the optics of telling the Legion that we are not granting their $6,000 request. Before we do anything, it makes sense to just have a conversation with them to see what they'd like to do, what we're willing to do, these are the options we have. Before saying no to the Legion.
I don't think we're saying no.
Yeah, I
We're,
think,
we're going back and
You are
saying,
saying no to the request for $6,000.
The way the request is worded, I guess.
yeah, but it's, I think, and we'll definitely have
The
that
intent
conversation
and
with
what will
them.
end up having happening will be correct, but some people at the Legion may not agree with how we're going to do it. Like, I don't know how things are.
But what you're proposing is what we did last year, right?
Yeah,
We,
except we're not giving them a check on the front end.
So we
Which
purchased
we did
it,
last year.
we gave them a check, we purchased them, then they reimbursed us the cost of the brackets?
No.
So we gave them the money and we bought the brackets. And
Gave them
installed the
money, they
brackets.
bought the brackets, but we installed them.
Yeah.
Okay, so instead of,
Oh,
Cost of
Okay.
installation.
Yeah.
Right.
sounds
They
like
need-
who's on first, what's on second?
so
Who's
are
on
they,
third?
are they anticipating to add 60?
No, we asked, they didn't specify a number until we asked when they're
Okay.
requesting
They said
it.
20.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, so say, just have a conversation to clear all this up,
Yeah.
what we're willing to do, what we propose to do.
Yeah.
So for the record, none of us disagree with how awesome this program is.
Excellent.
Great.
Great.
Fantastic.
More the merrier.
We're not saying no to being involved in it. It's just be nice to have some information about the process and what they're doing and what
Yeah, I
their
don't think
intent
anybody's in
is.
disagreement with the brackets. We will handle the brackets, we will handle the installation. I think everybody's in agreement on that. I think if
Personally,
the Legion knows that, that takes away the
Yeah.
the angst around
Yeah.
proceeding with something and not
Yeah,
being able to get.
and I don't know the details around the budget. I don't wanna see this in the grant if it's something that we're just gonna do from a maintenance perspective every year. I don't wanna see it in the grant thing next year.
I think there will be
Budget
conversations
being
with them.
already-
Felt very.
Clarify everything and then bring it
I
back.
don't wanna see.
Well, it's not.
I loved it, though. No, I loved
I mean, even in the
Yeah.
future, I mean,
I
this is
agree.
thrown wildly beyond what they imagined. You could have had double-sided banners with the veteran on the
Yes.
side. So at the end of the day, this is just thrown, which is what you want.
And this could be exponential growth, we don't even know yet.
That's right.
That's,
Okay.
We have
We need
purposes
more
for the
information.
banner, or for the brackets too, right?
Yeah.
We can
Yeah,
reuse them.
we can use it.
Well, that's part of the
exactly.
brackets is to Austin's point, we have all kinds of needs.
community days, there's all kinds, Canada Day, there's all kinds of use for them.
I'm ready for the question.
Yeah, so on the motion, I think, and we'll have those conversations with the Legion, that's like,
Wonderful.
going back to, it's April, we have lots of time to, and if there's a need,
You
if
need
they
to
say
bring them, yeah.
we needed the check, well, then we'll have a conversation.
Exactly, just more information.
All right,
On the motion.
No additional questions? All in favor? Contrary-minded?
That
Motion
was
carried.
great.
Yeah. That did take a lot.
that's a little bit more conversation over something more than 200.
Brain is just like, oh, okay.
And there's more. All right, so the next one was Stokely, who does the dog sled races. This request, was to help him, attend a race. The event has actually passed, prior to us getting to it. Basically, the staff has recommended not to donate at this time, so the race is over at this point.
Do we need to make this a motion to not,
No,
Right,
no,
the-
No,
no.
I would only recommend that
can I
that
ask?
we inform
Yeah, informative?
Mr. Stokely, that we inform him for the reasons, because I mean, obviously, it is, he went to an international event. It just, there was no time to consider it. I just hope that we make sure he knows that.
Do we recommend that he put in a recurring grant if it's something he's going to do every year?
Well, I think we could encourage if he's attending future events to put one in for consideration.
But he has no, what does it say here? No
No
connection to our municipal priorities. But I do wonder, do we give him a donation for coming out at Christmas?
Well, that's the, I mean, he's helped in the past, so
I
again,
think he does do stuff in our municipality.
he does.
He
I guess at the end of the day,
On
this one, we really can't do
No.
anything because it's after the fact. I
Right.
just want to make sure that we do send a letter to him indicating that this by no means.
Absolutely.
Can we get some advertising on the web?
These were all requests that came in before there was a policy,
Correct.
policy in place, so, replying with,
Oh, there you
a
go.
decline,
That's
but
right.
sending,
Or
policy-
future, but,
yeah,
yeah.
sending the grant policy
Absolutely.
for
Yeah,
future
that's
requests.
reworded just in a way that he understands that.
Yeah,
Not no,
Yeah,
not this time.
So next one was Community Days. Community Days Committee has been given $4,000 from council as a contribution for several years now. This is to help cover costs for the Community Days events, obviously. These funds are required to hold the events as this used to go to an actual committee. It was never budgeted under grants. It was just always,
Under the events budget.
sorry, under the events budget, it was under it, yeah. So we're recommending that council give $4,000 towards the 2023 Community Days from the grants budget.
I think I want to add on one thing before we dive into the motion, just because it was asked. So in future years, when we have control over the budget, it will be included in the events.
Thank you, that was my question. So tired of this.
That's the reason that it's the next one too, actually.
Yes.
But it's because we didn't get to do the budget.
No agency.
That's why. So, sorry.
So
but
this is
on-
just like a budget transfer, basically.
Basically, yes, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
So I'll move to give 4,000 towards the 2023 community days from the grants budget.
seconded. Oh, let's go.
No question.
By Councilor Carey, second by
I have
Councilor
one
Moore.
question.
Okay,
Oh.
questions, the motion.
With, considering that we've given $4,000 in previous years and we now have a far larger community, is $4,000 enough?
Right.
So we
That's a good
do
point.
have some in a new budget that's for convention centers. In the budget, that's for events, in the description it says events, so we asked for more for events, so we're gonna use a part of that. There's some pieces around things that we added last year, like fireworks, for instance, that we have like cost sharing with the fire association, or fire departments association, so on and so forth. So we have no reason to believe as of now that we'll surpass that, based on current assumptions. But that could also change. But we do have flexibility within the events budget, worst case.
Thank you.
Did we go out for committee members? Did we do
We're
that?
not doing
We're
it.
not
So
doing that
that's
anymore.
Canada Day, Community Days, all of those will be lumped into one of the new committees as opposed to having one specific. Because if we have one specific for each, we're supposed to have terms of reference for each of them. So they'll be lumped.
Events
together.
committee.
Yeah, the community
essentially.
enhancement will be the one that will look at events amongst many other things.
And that'll be in place before.
It's already in place.
We haven't actually started the meetings, but the terms of reference are approved, and residents have been applying, but they haven't been appointed like we did for the
And the
volunteers.
counselors were appointed.
Correct, yeah, last meeting, yeah.
Let's say your budget's good unless you plan on expanding programming.
Yeah.
Cool.
Because I
You're gonna have the
expect,
same people.
yeah, I expect you've been to the community days. Exactly.
Don't you say
I-
one horrible thing about.
I'm saying that we've already been there. All the outside areas have already been here. We've always been here.
And I love it.
Great to have some
Questions to the motion?
We are doing that.
No.
With the events.
No additional questions to the motion, all in favor? Contrary minded, motion carried.
So like Community Days, Canada Day was a committee. It was given $500 contribution for several years to cover costs of the free barbecue during Canada Day celebrations. These funds are required because usually we use the Canada Heritage Grant, which does not cover food items other than Happy Canada Day cake. So this $500 was enabled the Canada Day community to actually have this free barbecue. So this is not something that was budgeted again under the events budget. And we're recommending that council give us $1,000 this year towards the 2023 Canada Day celebrations to help cover the cost of food. The remainder of the funds needed, again, will be covered hopefully by Canada Heritage should we receive the funding. If we don't receive the funding, we'll be back.
I moved to
Okay, I
give
move-
1,000. Do you want to do it? Let's go. I moved to give $1,000 towards 2023 Canada Day celebrations to help cover the cost of food on Canada Day.
And I second.
Councilor Thorne, seconded by
Quick draw.
I'm gonna actually start this with the questions around, similar to community days. The turnout last year was phenomenal. Like, again, I think you are gonna be coming back, hopefully, it's a good problem to have, but, I think
Depends on how much funding.
Councilor, go
I
ahead.
barbecued a lot of those.
A lot of hot dogs.
The number of hot dogs you guys barbecued was
Yeah.
crazy, the number of, like, literally, we were running out of stuff. Was a really good problem to have, but,
We're seeing that with all of our events. I think.
yeah, which was really good.
Serving food is my favorite thing to do. at
Same.
this
So
day.
Jason, you can't make like a cake out of hot dogs so that we get the grant?
Devil whammy.
Yeah.
We had years where there was food left over, there was nothing left over.
Yeah.
So,
We
The
can
cake is
donate water.
Is that?
We can donate water.
Water was,
Sometimes we have water donated by businesses,
Yeah.
really for drinks, but like the grant itself just doesn't pay for food. It'll
Yeah,
pay for
and they-
food
and they-
and the, no.
and they cut back the
Forced-
grant.
they did, they cut back the
the
grant.
Federal government, so.
So again, just depends on what we get for grant this year, whether we need one.
We've run out of food the last two events, right?
Yeah.
Well, it's just the great barbecuers we have and great food.
Yeah, obviously.
Like a
Sure.
lot, a lot of people from outside of,
It's so much.
like a lot of people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a lot of fun.
It is fun.
Okay. Additional questions to the motion? All in favor? Reminded? Motion carried.
Next one was Tri-County Ground Search and Rescue, request for financial assistance as well as assistance by other means, so they're also, asking if we had any donated spaces for meetings or training or surplus equipment that we might have that they could use, that they would like us to remember them, basically. Recommendation is not to award funding at this time, but follow up for a presentation, to council and advise of future grant opportunities, processes, and deadlines.
I don't think we need a motion to this, but I do have a question only around last year, I believe at this exact same time, we would have talked about the exact same thing. Did they ever, they never responded back to come to
And then
council?
COVID hit and we had no meetings.
Okay. So,
Come on down.
yeah, essentially from a historical perspective, we weren't aware.
There's really
People organizing.
So we get to meet them.
Search for
Yep.
stuff.
So yeah, I would just say let's invite them in to present to council.
Okay, and the last one I think on here is grad class bursary. Now, this was put on there just because it's a standing request each year. Grad class bursaries have been given to council, given by council for many years. In the past, it's typically been $600 contribution for 3 bursaries of 200, and in 2022, council gave 1,500 contribution, which is 3 bursaries of 500. So we're recommending that council give 3 bursaries again this year at $500 each for the 2023 grad class.
I'll move that council give 3 bursaries of $500 to the 2023 grad class.
Second.
I believe it's second by Councilor Thorne. There's a kind of a little tie there between her and Dexter, Councilor Dexter, I'm not sure.
Similar to,
Questions to the motion?
sorry, similar to the Legion question. How do they decide? Do they have a committee that decides who gets these grants?
The school does, yeah.
And are they presented from the town of Salisbury?
Usually the mayor is requested at the graduation and she, whoever it is at the time, presents it, yeah. on-
Depends during COVID, because during COVID, it was
It was-
really a speed.
So should we have a
Across.
representative from our staff part of that decision panel? If it's a grant coming from our.
I don't, typically, we've always just said to a student from Salisbury.
Yeah.
I'm just
Who's
thinking.
extending
if
their-
it's being presented
Yeah.
from us.
They have like an internal selection for all their internal ones. So there's like one in memorial of
You can
many
choose
different
their
people.
criteria, They select the student.
Yeah.
Typically.
Yeah.
But like, you know,
I know we're getting better at including outside people in committees and decisions. I just didn't know if it would.
I would just say there would become a perception probably that,
Yeah.
like, I would say that
Yeah.
we should stay hands
Easier.
off from that to avoid politicizing someone's $500 bursary.
So we're
I
the,
just don't
we're
think
the
it would.
investors who fund it.
Yeah.
you could stipulate if they're studying a certain course.
Yeah.
or-
And
Yeah.
typically we ask people
Right.
furthering their education is how
Yeah.
they worded it usually.
Okay.
Say that.
I guess I'd like to know what the stipulations are when you get there. What are you gonna give them for criteria? If we are.
Do we want to give them, I think we normally give them furthering education, what
That's
what
always
you mentioned, so,
What
And then
about
they-
Anybody going to
the next mayor of?
political science majors?
President,
Political
of the student
science.
council.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You could,
Student leadership,
Mhm.
could be somebody who's demonstrated leadership.
yeah,
Community leadership.
Yeah.
There's lots of
you
opportunities.
could certainly,
tailor it.
yeah.
Community, yeah.
I mean, we
Community
could
leader.
recommend it to the clerk's office.
Maybe that they're just, that they volunteered,
Yeah.
like, I mean, along with their great studies. Made a difference. in
I would say we make a
someone's life.
decision tonight to avoid having
Mhm.
the requirement to come back, but that's
That's
just
meant for
my
next year.
opinion. Oh, okay, yeah. So for this year.
Yeah, like proceed as is.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay,
Further in education.
okay, perfect. Okay,
Yeah.
for future years, probably same thing. We'll tell them they should do a multi-year piece and we can do a formal agreement.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Additional questions to the motion? All in favor? Contrary minded,
It was bad.
motion carried.
And basically, as the COA mentioned, it's 11,500 total grant request out of the 35,000. If all were approved, and letters will be sent out to all the gov, basically advising them of the council's decision.
Councilor Thorne.
Yes,
Good.
I would like to request a recess. please.
Seconded.
Okay, so moved by Councilor Thorne, seconded by
Go back.
I was wondering when that
Sure.
wellness break.
regular session, so moved by Councilor Thorne, seconded by Councilor Extra. All in favor?
Aye.
Minded, motion carried. We're back in the regular meeting. With that, let's move on to item number 9. Number 7 of the, section 8, reports from administration, RCMP collective agreement, retroactive cost impact.
So as noted in a briefing or a memo sent to council, the long story short with this situation is that the RCMP have unionized in the last couple of years, which has meant a retroactive pay back to 2017. So municipalities, so through UMB or FCM, whatever it may be, were not involved in these conversations around unionizing, despite the fact that municipalities are the ones that foot the majority of the bill for RCMP contracted policing. So a couple of weeks ago now, I guess, in the federal budget, it came as a surprise that the federal government was not absorbing these costs. At this point, I asked today at the Service Commission as well to other municipalities, the costs are unknown unless they have existing agreements with whether it be the tri-communities that doesn't have an agreement directly with Justice and Public Safety. The costs are still unknown for everyone. There's a hope that the costs will be covered in New Brunswick at least, because we were provided with additional charges basically in anticipation of a potential retroactive pay. For us, it's not clear if LSDs in the past couple of years have also paid that. There's just a lot of unknowns. So ultimately right now we're continuing our conversations. As soon as I hear from Justice and Public Safety, whether it comes from me or from Diane or to the mayor, we have no idea. All the other places will as well, so we'll have an understanding very quickly of what the impact is across the province. And so with that, FCM circulated a draft resolution to their member municipalities to encourage them to put it basically on the docket to state that the municipalities would request that the federal government consider municipalities and the implications for them moving forward for these types of decisions. And that resolution included a reference to sending a letter as well. So that has also been drafted in the agenda package. So with that, I'll pass it over to if a councillor would like to pass the resolution, which was provided by FCM.
Full page, eh?
Yes.
I'll read that. Is everyone okay with that?
Go for it.
Whereas the Government of Canada has made the decision in Budget 2023 to make municipalities responsible for all retroactive costs stemming from the latest RCMP collective bargaining agreement. And whereas these extraordinary one-time costs, which in some larger jurisdictions amount to millions of dollars, will cause significant hardship for communities and residents across the country, and were negotiated without meaningful consultation or a seat at the table for the municipalities responsible for paying the bill. And whereas the town does not have information from the province of New Brunswick on whether or not additional fees incurred proactively in recent years will be sufficient for the retroactive costs, nor is the town aware of whether or not former local service districts now composing a significant amount of the town's tax base also paid additional fees in preparation for retroactive salary costs. And whereas municipal governments are already paying a growing share of policing costs, but unlike other orders of government cannot run definite deficits to spread out the impact of these extraordinary one-time sums and have limited revenue tools. And whereas local governments may now be forced to make difficult decisions that will impact residents, such as cutting essential services, reducing policing levels, raising property taxes significantly, and or canceling work on local infrastructure at a time when Canadians' concerns about community safety and the cost of living are already rising. And whereas going forward, it is critical that municipalities be proactively engaged in any forthcoming processes related to contract policing to prevent this occurring again. And therefore, be it resolved that the town of Salisbury joins the Federation of Canadian Municipalities in calling on the federal government to commit to ensuring that local governments are meaningfully consulted, fully informed, and at the table on issues relating to policing costs, given the municipal role in keeping our communities safe. And be it further resolved that the town of Salisbury conveys this support in writing to local members of parliament, local members of the legislative assembly, and to the provincial minister of justice and public safety. So moved.
Moved by Councilor Thorne.
Thank you.
By Councilor Linas.
Great job.
Thank you so much.
To the motion.
So, I think Jason, you said something out, you mentioned that you'd said something, I didn't get a chance to look at it. Should we not be somehow proactively going out to, either through the fair or from the town or something, going out to residents and giving them a heads up as it relates to this? I know that we don't know what the amount is, but I'd rather go out and tell them, by the way, we don't know what it is, but it's going to be something, and here's why it is and what it is, rather than just going out at some point and saying, by the way, you know.
I think it's a good point. We did it, and Diane, we did that in the past when this first came up, that we raised a flag with residents that we could get hit with a major bill that we don't know what the amount would be.
I
We did it in a newsletter. so-
don't think that's a great idea to cause
Concern.
concern when we don't know. Like, my understanding is that there may be enough money in reserve to cover this. So could we wait until we have more information?
I think that that's a good idea. Wait until we have the information.
So the only thing I would add, I would agree with you, here's the point I have though. It still doesn't address, so the cost is one thing, but it's the process. You know,
Right.
They went out and they did all of these things. You know, most of this resolution is not necessarily to do with the ultimate cost. It was the fact that they
Right.
did all this. I mean, so we should, this should be something that I think we need the residents to know, because,
Well,
you know, they were.
Regardless of the reserve, it's if we use the reserve, that was money we could have had to remember.
Yeah.
From
the end of the day-
the province's reserve, that they've been keeping.
Right.
Yeah,
Right, but
that we
still,
don't know if that will cover.
Right,
That's what I
it's
meant.
still money we've contributed.
And I recommend that we share the letter that we're sending to our MP on social media and with our residents, so that they can see our frustration with the process.
That's a great.
Yeah, that is a great recommendation.
Yeah.
They should know that we're advocating for them.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Agreed.
Do we something?
Well, and it goes to sort of something else I was gonna bring up, and it was very fortuitous that Austin sent this note out about the 100 days. I think that one of the things we need at some point in time soon is, it'd be nice to be able to go out and tell the residents, okay, what have we done in the last 100 days? Right, because I think when you consider the fact that that we're all together now, a lot of people outside, both in the village and outside the village, of course, are gonna be wondering, oh, what have these guys done in the last 3 months? You know, and so, I mean, I would certainly be a volunteer with anybody else who wants to sit down and figure out how we might be able to go out, whether it's video or something of that nature, that sort of just gives them, the residents, an idea, well, we have been working, we have been doing some things, we've accomplished some things, and we've got some things that are sitting in the hopper waiting for us to move forward on, so that people know. What's going.
I would encourage them to sign up for the municipal newsletter that will be coming out in the next couple of weeks. That will include a highlight on council decisions, and also there'll be something on social media tomorrow, similar to what council was given today, with obviously less detail, because everyone doesn't really care about policies and bylaws to the same extent as the rest of us. So it's a summary of the long bulleted list that council gets. So we'll be doing that tomorrow, but obviously council is encouraged to share it, do their own, that sort of thing as well.
So generally though, when we,
Share it on my page.
when we send a letter like this, do we typically share that on our website or social media?
Done it a couple of times, but not all, no. If you're gonna have minutes that explain, this is what happened, here's what
Yeah.
like, that'll all be in the minutes.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea to put it on the site, send us the link or let us know where it is. And then we can use that link in any other Facebook site that we have, or any other way we want to communicate with the people in our wards. And that way they have it. Minutes is great, obviously it needs to be there, but how many people are reading our
No,
minutes?
it's bullet
More
points
people-
and
the
highlights.
more We get to sign up for the distribution of the newsletter,
Oh,
the
absolutely,
better off we're gonna be.
yeah.
For sure. Additional questions?
And also keep it going in the local paper as well, the local news. That's excellent.
You know, I think you mentioned something, this would have been some weeks ago. And I don't know what, it was like banner boards or something that we were talking
That was
about.
the grant application, which we haven't heard on.
Well, okay, because it seems to me that those are some of the, for more, even at the corner here, or strategically located places. For more information on town events and activities, go to, so that at least people driving by will know wherever, and they might decide that if they haven't done it already, we can reference the monthly update or something. I think we need to do more because I'm still getting, and I don't share everything I get with you guys, although Boston probably thinks I do. I still get a lot of comments from residents. I didn't know this, I didn't know that, I had no idea about this, and
Sure.
We'll
You know.
continue to get those. We still get them. So ultimately with this one, what we can do is share it and we'll include it in the newsletter piece as well. And again, for the sake of repeating myself, just so I can do it again, please encourage residents to sign up for that so that we can be worthwhile of putting it together.
Yeah, I guess that is a good point. So when residents come to you and say that they weren't aware of something, we should be referring them to sign up for that.
Absolutely, yeah.
Do we have budget for a town crier or?
That's part of your job,
Whatever, yeah,
actually.
You know what, John, I'd love to see you in one of those outfits.
With that, no additional questions, so if we move on, we have a tight agenda.
Yeah.
All in favor?
Aye.
Reminded? Motion carried. Okay, now we'll move on to number 9, bylaws. Item number 1, first and second reading culvert bylaw.
I'm gonna jump in. I'm gonna pass this all to Diane, but one piece on the culvert bylaw is we discussed this at committee of the whole, so I wanted to mention one specific piece around the pricing. So you'll see that it's in the CRF. We've given an analysis of some other municipalities that we heard back from, that we inquired with, from a timing perspective. So ultimately we have two decisions. We can update the bylaw with the fees. We're proposing another 25% increase for a total of 50%, which should cover the costs. For the most part, and then come back with, we'll scrutinize basically all of the invoices that come in to determine how much the culvert costs versus additional ditching, so on and so forth. Because the alternative is to use 2022's rates, which will not recuperate, as we know, because the installations start at the start of May. So we'll basically hold any applications that we get until May 8th, after council can do third reading for this bylaw as it currently stands, and then we'll propose an amended schedule if needed, if additional fees or process changes are required after that. So I wanted to mention that before I pass it to Diane, in case there's questions as to why it's coming back with this number and not a totally revamped process, in light of our conversation at committee of the whole.
You want us to respond to that?
You can.
No.
You can, you can. I would say we do, from a process perspective, what do we have to, like, do we want?
If they're going to do first and second reading first.
Yeah,
If you're like not going to.
Yeah.
Then it's not even worth going through
Right.
the whole.
the reading piece of that. So do we have any?
So could we discuss now then, before we go through the process, I guess, is what we're saying.
Of what your bylaw is?
Yeah,
I just want to respond to that
That.
one.
okay, we can do that before a motion is on the board. Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
Don't make it bigger than it is.
No, I wasn't super thrilled with the 50%, just because I still feel like some residents are gonna be subsidizing others. So I get it, and I want to do it because I don't want to stay at the current rates, but I still feel like we need to be working towards finding a solution, and even though I didn't see it in any of the ones that you looked at, we need to find a way to make the user pay for the fee.
There are some ways of doing it. I don't know exactly which one, but some have basically the residents are responsible for it. Our caution is that we would want to have a list of approved contractors.
Right.
We also get the contractors to
Right.
sign off on
Yeah.
what they have to do.
Yeah.
That's probably where we'll go. If
And I
this-
feel like
these
that's
costs don't
great
recuperate.
as long as it's still on the table, because I'm not okay with just increasing the fees every year and still having that subsidizing taking place, because
In
I
a-
don't think it's fair.
In a perfect world, we would be able to amend the schedule of the former, but we cannot do that as the new entity. To amend an old bylaw, we have to
Right.
repeal and replace. So in order to repeal and replace, we have to go through the full 3 readings.
Yeah.
And if we had more time, we could have something like that in place.
Totally fine with that.
So it will very much be on the radar. We're going to inform the contractors too. They have to very clearly stipulate on their invoice how much cost was associated to the actual culvert installation
Right.
versus ditching. Because of the argument is basically that the municipality is responsible for ditching and arguably has not had enough budgeted to
Right.
adequately ditch in
Right.
recent years.
Okay.
So then when a culvert becomes required, we're spending money on ditching that isn't necessarily because of the culvert, but is being caused because otherwise the culvert is redundant. So that's the conversation that I think
Yeah.
we need to scrutinize in order to actually have a fair comparison.
Yeah. I
Which we
guess
will
all
do.
I want is to make sure that it doesn't fall off the radar, that this process
Yeah.
sucks.
Yeah, it will not fall off the
Okay,
radar.
great.
It will not fall off the radar.
So I will give you a summary of the bylaw. So culvert bylaw, this proposed bylaw is entitled Town of Salisbury Bylaw Number 5, a bylaw respecting driveway culverts and entrances. This bylaw updates the former Village of Salisbury bylaw number 33, driveway culverts and entrances, and also includes a schedule in the bylaw to only apply to these geographical boundaries, since the town is not responsible for regulating culverts and driveways in the outside areas. The purpose of the bylaw, the purpose of the bylaw is to outline the requirements that must be met when installing and maintaining driveway culverts and entrances. The primary changes that were taken from the former bylaw are adding a maximum of the amount of driveway culvert can cover for a lot frontage, and increasing the fee by 50% of last year's 2022 rates, based on council's deliberation during committee of the whole in February. So if council wishes to proceed, we need a recommendation or a motion to proceed with the first and second reading of bylaw number 5 by title only.
I think that's we have to add in the recommendation, we have to add in the actual motion, so on council, whoever moves the motion, to add at the end, be read for first and second time by title only.
Okay, so we can make that now. So I move that the town of the town of Salisbury bylaw number 5, a bylaw respecting driveway culverts and entrances, be read for the first and second time by title only. So moved.
So moved by Councillor Thorne, seconded by Councillor Glant. Questions to the motion?
More of a comment is, I agree with Councillor Thorne. I want to see a policy where we're recovering the full cost of this. So if we put that on to revisit this in 2024 for the 2020, I agree with doing this for 2023, but we should revisit it again for 2024 to revamp it and.
It'll be revised this year for next year, so we're not in a crunch, basically. Because basically we ultimately have to budget or not budget, like that's essentially, if we're hypothetically, if we're putting it on the homeowners and have a process where we have approved contractors, we will not have to have the same budget for culverts.
Wonderful, more fireworks.
Fireworks. On the motion.
Just like.
On the motion.
Additional questions to the motion?
But does that mean that also you'd have an approved list of contractors for commercial as well?
Any driveway entrances within the schedule of the geographic area.
Of the village?
Yeah.
Former village?
Oh,
or
Yeah,
after?
it's just the village.
Because
Former.
DPI is responsible for
Former.
the outside areas.
Because anything at the big stop would still be required. That whole area would be required for us to pay half now, isn't it?
To pay what, sorry?
We'd have to pay 50% of the cost now currently?
It won't be the full 50%, depends on the length, but it would be, depending on the length of the culvert, it would be the rate that's in the schedule. So we're increasing it by 50%, the majority should be covered, there may often be ditching, the problem is ditching costs is what it is, it's the unpredictable piece. But regardless of where it is, if it's in that boundary, that area would be, but it's new culvert entrances, new driveway entrances.
We're not paying 50% of the culvert. We've increased the rates of the culverts, which was a set rate, by 50%.
And last year was also increased by 25.
But is this only residential or is this also commercial?
Any driveway entrance,
On a municipal road.
New though,
new.
new.
Yeah, because it becomes we own it after.
Mhm.
The town owns it and is responsible for it after. That's the biggest, if we weren't responsible for it, it would be a whole different conversation.
That's the point that
Yeah.
Councillor Thorne and Councillor.
Yeah, make 100% this
I
is
think you're
possible.
Yeah.
I think you're basically agreeing with them for the future.
Just agree with me for everything. It'll be fine.
That's what you tell your husband, is that right?
30 years.
Any further questions?
Additional questions,
Great,
motion,
right.
no additional questions, all in favor of the motion? Contrary minded, motion carried.
So first reading of bylaw number 5 by title only, a bylaw respecting driveway culverts and entrances. For second reading, bylaw number 5, a bylaw respecting driveway culverts and entrances. As usual, this will be posted on our website. Social media will probably link to it. We'll also have it available here in the office for anybody who doesn't go on those and wants to take a look and review it prior to third reading and enactment at hopefully the next council meeting.
Okay, item number 2 in section 9, first and second readings, sewer collections bylaw.
I don't have anything on this
Okay.
one. I have nothing on the other ones. It was just that one.
Okay, so the purpose of this bylaw is entitled, I can't even talk. The proposed bylaw is entitled Town of Salisbury Bylaw Number 6, a bylaw respecting sewerage and the collection of user charges for the sanitary sewer system in Salisbury. This bylaw updates and combines the former Village of Salisbury bylaw number 34 respecting sewerage rates and charges, and bylaw number 45, a bylaw relating to the user charges for the sanitary sewer system of the Village of Salisbury. The purpose of this bylaw is to regulate the requirements for the maintenance and connection to the municipal sewerage system, as well as outline the jurisdiction and authority for the collection of annual user charges. The bylaws are being combined into one where they were related to the same infrastructure for simplicity of enforcing the bylaw and regulating the sewerage system. The main changes are the removal of a deposit to connect the lateral to the sewer mains in the event of repairs not being completed, since this is now managed through the town directly. Adjustments of fees for violations, including reflecting legal authority under the Act, and clarifying language around responsibilities of the homeowners for repairs within their property lines. It is also worth noting that the collections policy approved by council in January is also within the schedule of the bylaw.
So I'll move that the town of Salisbury bylaw number 6, a bylaw respecting sewerages and the collection of user charges for the sanitary sewer system in Salisbury be read for a first and second time by title only.
Second that.
Moved by Councilor Dykstra, seconded by Councilor Oblinus. Questions to the motion? No questions to the motion. All in favor? Contrary minded, motion carried. Item number 3 in.
So first
Sorry.
reading. So, so first reading of, I'm just gonna double check so I don't say the wrong title. First reading of bylaw number 6, bylaw respecting sewerage and the collection of user charges for the sanitary sewerage system in Salisbury. Reading number 2, a bylaw number 6, a bylaw respecting sewerage and collection of user charges for the sanitary sewer system in Salisbury. Again, this will be posted online, websites, links, as well as being available here in the office for people to review until third reading and enactment.
Perfect. Item.
So what happens if there's an adjustment required?
We can
Do we
make
go back
minor
to first?
adjustments up until the third reading.
Yeah.
So if you find a minor adjustment, if it's something that's like totally changes it, then they
We go
suggest you go back and redo.
Restart.
Item number 3, section 9, first and second readings, building bylaw.
The proposed bylaw is entitled Town of Salisbury Bylaw Number 7, Building Bylaw. This bylaw updates the former Village of Salisbury Bylaw Number 36, Building Bylaw, and also regulates the building permitting fees for the outside area. The purpose of this bylaw is to determine the permitting requirements, application process, and fees for the full town, including both former village and former LSD, as local service districts. The primary changes are to make the fees consistent, removing the maximum thresholds, and update the bylaw to new provincial legislations.
The recommendation just says motion text.
Yeah, that's
Do
my
you
fault.
have it written down
the
somewhere?
Same
It's the
thing.
same text as before. I noticed that. Sorry. It's highlighted for you and everything to catch it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Okay,
my
I see.
apologies. So this is the same as the previous recommendations. That's an awesome oopsie.
Trying to find the name of the bylaws.
Bylaw number 7.
Building bylaw.
Bylaw.
We are reading the bylaw.
I'll move that bylaw number 7, building bylaw be have a first and second reading. By title
By
only.
title
Thank you.
Moved by
Great
Councillor Oblinus, seconded by Councillor Galant. Questions to the motion? No questions to the motion, all questions to the motion?
Quick question, with any future larger developments, does that 750 represent an adequate price? Or does that have to do anything in the future? From, you have construction value for residents at $5 per 1,000 or 750 for commercial, industrial, institutional, multi-use residential.
Do you mean like, is it enough to recuperate costs per se, or?
Yeah, yes.
So it's, depends on who you ask, I think. It's a decision of council. You could increase it. Right now, I actually, is that the rate for the outside areas? I don't know. It is commercial, so that's what it is now for commercial. The inside, like former village, is 350. And there's a maximum. So for instance, when Lori was here a couple weeks ago, she mentioned the example in Sackville. That's $100 and some thousand for the permit. It's an institutional use. Here it will be 1,500 because we have that max. So now it at least removes that max. This year, where we don't have really an understanding of the permitting areas until Lori was here and we got a bit of an understanding, we'll be able to assess basically the areas that have more or less construction and if there's a future change required. The city in the memo that came from Plan 360 as a comparison put their rate up to $8 for residential. It was $8 per $1,000 value for residential. This $5 keeps it at the same for the outside areas and increases from $3 to $5 for the $2.50 to $5 for the inside former village. So we're increasing it now, but we will monitor it basically throughout the year as we have a better understanding of where there are areas, and then it can be like amended should council choose, if we say we could be getting more, we should be getting more, that sort of thing.
So that, I guess that's my question. Is there a mechanism to adjust that based on market pressures?
They use a calculator residentially, commercially, I don't think they do. So I think it would be
Come back.
dependent on the area, yeah, what others are. They often, Plan 360 is they will come back and say, you should increase, and they'll come with a recommendation to council. So they would do that if.
Is
if
there a
it's
way
the-
we can, in the future, build in an escalator within our formula without having to go through readings?
No, you'd have to do
Yeah.
three readings or add it as a schedule, which you could do. But for the way that it is now, you can only do that if it's a schedule. You have to do it 3 full readings if it's in the content of the file. So I would say we monitor it for this year and then we determine, it's one of the unknowns, unfortunately, like many things. But it's basically to get in place so that if we have commercial, which we do, if we have commercial construction going on right now, they're being charged the 2022 rates. So it's one of the priorities that we want to be able to recuperate more costs.
I mean, anything
appropriately.
is better than what we had,
Mhm.
right, with that maximum?
Correct.
How quickly will this take effect?
Takes effect after third reading.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So this, just to reiterate what you said, this is the same pricing as the outside the village had already, so there's no change.
For
There
the
is for the
inside.
inside area.
Inside,
we're
but not
bringing it
outside.
to levels of the inside.
Yeah, correct.
Do you know what the commercial rate is in town?
I don't, I can check the
That's
memo.
max of 2,000, right? Max 2,000 for.
He's talking town as in Moncton?
Oh,
Yeah, look, I can
Well,
check.
no, no, that's-
Yeah, that's gonna take.
Residential rate.
Anyways, we can carry on. I'm just curious.
Yeah, I can find out. I'm gonna look now.
Any additional questions to the motion? No additional questions, all in favor? Contrary minded, motion carried.
So, first reading of bylaw number 7 by title only, building bylaw. Second reading, bylaw number 7, building bylaw. Again, this will be posted, available online, available at the office for people to view. And send their written objections to anything or comments. And, hopefully be third reading and enactment at the next meeting.
Item number 10, closed session, financial contractual 68(1)(c), Local Governance Act, Land 68(1)(d), Local Governance Act, Legal 68(1)(f), Local Governance Act, Personnel 68(1)(l), Local Governance Act. Do we have a Thanks, Councilor.
So move.
Moved by Councilor Thorne, seconded by Councilor Oblinus. All in favor?
Aye.
Contrary minded? We are now in closed. We have a motion to go back into regular session. from
Seconded.
Councilor Thorne, seconded by Councilor Delant. All in favor?
Aye.
Contrary minded? Motion carried. With that, item 11, mayor and councilor statements, inquiries. Nothing. Item number 12, notices of motions and resolutions.
None this
Nothing.
evening.
With that, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
So moved by Councilor Thorne, seconded by Councilor Deputy Mayor Bannister. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carried.